Have you ever trusted someone with everything, only to find out they've been plotting against you all along? My journey was a battle between betrayal and redemption, and I learned the hard way that loyalty is priceless. But the real victory isn't in the fight, it's in standing tall after you've been knocked down. If you've ever faced betrayal or felt like the world was against you, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to follow my journey, because the battle for redemption is never over, and there's always more to uncover. I sat in my sleek, modern office overlooking the bustling streets of New York City. My eyes, usually sharp and focused, were now glued to the screen in front of me, staring blankly at the email that had just popped up. The subject line read, "Urgent, legal action filed against your company." I clicked on it, a sense of unease creeping over me. It wasn't unusual to have legal matters to deal with in my line of work, but this felt different. The email was from a prestigious law firm in the city, one I had heard of but never interacted with before. The message explained that a major lawsuit had been filed against my company, Grantech Solutions, by one of our largest competitors in the software industry, Tekor Systems. The allegations were serious, accusing Grantech of intellectual property theft and unfair business practices. As I skimmed through the legal jargon, my heart sank. Not only were these accusations baseless, but they threatened to destroy everything I had worked for. My company was my baby, built from the ground up over the past 6 years, and now it could all come crumbling down because of a few carefully placed lies. Tekor had the resources, the connections, and the reputation to make this fight incredibly difficult. Just as I was processing all of this, my phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a name I wasn't expecting: John Peterson, the lead partner at the law firm. I answered quickly, trying to steady my nerves. "Mr. Grant, I understand this is a lot to process." John's voice came through the line, calm but serious. "We need to prepare for the worst. Tekor is not backing down, and they've got a strong case. We'll need all hands on deck to defend this." I took a deep breath, trying to control my rising frustration. "I don't understand. This is insane. We've done nothing wrong." "I agree, but unfortunately, the lawsuit is real. They're accusing you of stealing their proprietary software code, and they've got evidence at least. That's what they're claiming." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Who's behind this? Who filed the complaint? There was a brief pause before John spoke again, his voice lowering, as though he was about to share something important. "This is going to be tough to hear, Alex, but the person behind this lawsuit is David Bennett." My stomach dropped. David Bennett, my best friend since college, the man I had trusted with everything, the one person I thought I could rely on in a world full of sharks. The same David who had been by my side when we built Grantech from the ground up. "David," I muttered, my voice barely audible. "But why? Why would he do this?" "I'm afraid that's something only David can answer," John replied, his tone heavy with sympathy. "But it seems that his company, Bennett Software, has been hit hard recently, and he's trying to make an example of Grantech." "I'm sorry, Alex." The words hung in the air, suffocating me. David, the friend I had shared everything with, the one who had been my confidant through thick and thin, was now the person who had launched a legal war that could end everything I had worked for. My mind was reeling, but one thing was crystal clear. This was not just a lawsuit. This was personal. I couldn't shake off the conversation from earlier that day. David Bennett, my best friend, the man who had stood by my side through thick and thin, the one person I trusted more than anyone else. And yet, David was the very one who had filed a lawsuit against me, trying to destroy everything I had worked so hard for. Sitting in my office, the weight of the betrayal was almost suffocating. How could David, the man I had shared countless late-night talks and business ideas with, suddenly become my enemy? I needed answers, and I knew the only way to get them was to dig deeper into David's life. Without wasting any more time, I opened my laptop and started searching. I needed to know everything about David's recent activities. I scrolled through news articles, business reports, and even social media profiles. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. David had always been a reserved person, avoiding the public eye. But I noticed something strange. David had become increasingly involved with Bennett Software, a tech company he had been quietly managing for years. I had always thought of David as someone who valued loyalty, someone who would never jeopardize a friendship over business. But as I dug deeper, the cracks began to appear. I found an old news article that detailed the fall of Bennett Software, company that had been struggling to stay afloat for years. David had been under pressure to perform, and with the recent rise of GrandTech, the pressure had only intensified. I realized that over time, David's resentment had been growing, his jealousy festering in silence. The small cracks in our friendship, those late-night arguments about business decisions and the future of our companies, had been building to this moment. The more I read, the more I realized that David wasn't just trying to bring down GrandTech. There was something much darker at play. I stumbled upon a financial document that raised a red flag. Bennett Software had secretly entered into an agreement with a competitor, Techor, months before the lawsuit was filed. It was clear now David wasn't just sabotaging my company. He was working with Techor in an orchestrated plan to take down GrandTech from the inside. But the true shock came when I discovered a series of encrypted emails between David and a mysterious figure named Victor Klein, a name that was unfamiliar to me. These emails were filled with coded language, discussing a plan for corporate destruction and extraction of assets from my company. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that David's betrayal wasn't just about business, it was personal. David had been plotting his revenge for months, using my own trust against me. The idea that someone I considered a brother was capable of such manipulation hit me harder than I could have imagined. The betrayal wasn't just in the lawsuit, it was in the carefully orchestrated plan to destroy not only my company, but everything I had built. This wasn't just business, this was a vendetta. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. David wasn't just trying to beat me in the business world. He was out for blood, and I had to stop him, no matter the cost. The fight had just begun, and I was ready to turn the tables. I leaned back in my chair, the cold, sterile office lights casting long shadows over my desk. The discovery of David's betrayal still gnawed at me, but I wasn't going to let it break me. If David thought he could destroy everything I had worked for with a mere lawsuit, he was gravely mistaken. My mind raced as I pored over the evidence I had gathered. David was using every connection he had to speed up the lawsuit. Techor, with its vast legal resources, was backing David's every move. It was becoming clear that David was playing a game he knew all too well. Every step I took, every decision I made to defend my company, David was always one step ahead. The lawsuit was just the beginning. It was clear now that David's ultimate goal wasn't just to cripple GrandTech, it was to completely obliterate it. But I wasn't about to roll over. I had built this company from the ground up, and I wasn't going to let a former friend destroy it. I knew that if I fought David in the courts, it would be a battle of attrition that could drag on for years, and in the meantime, GrandTech would suffer. I needed something more clever, something that would give me the upper hand. My strategy wouldn't involve the legal system, at least, not at first. Instead, I would use my intelligence, my network, and a bit of old-fashioned subterfuge to turn the tide. I knew the industry inside and out, and I had connections that David couldn't possibly foresee. The first move came quietly. I reached out to a few former colleagues, people who had once worked at Bennett Software. I had kept a few relationships from those days, despite the fallouts that had occurred when David took control. One of them, a man named Ben Parker, had been part of the technical team at Bennett Software before it all went south. I knew Ben had insights into some of David's more questionable business dealings, and he was willing to talk. After a few discreet meetings, Ben provided me with some damning information about David's financial dealings and savory investments and illegal transfers that could ruin David's credibility in the eyes of investors. Armed with this new ammunition, I began laying the groundwork for a counterattack. But I wasn't done yet. I had learned long ago that the best way to break an opponent was to attack their confidence. And David's confidence rested in his alliance with Ticor. So, I decided to go after the heart of Ticor itself, its CEO, Margaret Winters. She was known for her ruthless business tactics, but I had a few skeletons of my own to dig up about her. I'd heard whispers about some of Ticor's shady contracts, particularly one with a competitor in Europe that had yet to see the light of day. If I could leak that information at just the right moment, it could destroy Ticor's reputation and send David's case crumbling down. The next move came in the form of an unexpected ally. While I had been investigating David, I had also been keeping an eye on one of David's former allies, a man named Victor Caldwell, a wealthy investor with ties to both Bennett Software and Ticor. I had always known that Victor had a questionable past, one that he kept hidden from the public eye. After a few well-placed conversations and a promise of some lucrative returns, I managed to secure Victor's cooperation. Victor agreed to help me undermine David's credibility, but only if I agreed to certain terms I wasn't quite ready to accept. Still, I knew that every piece on the board mattered. With Ben's information, Victor's help, and some carefully timed leaks, I was setting the stage for a showdown. The battle was about to take a dramatic turn, one that David wouldn't see coming. I had decided to play the long game, and now it was a matter of waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As I watched the city below from my office window, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't a fight I had chosen, but it was a fight I would win. I wouldn't let David or anyone else destroy everything I had built. It was time to show David that the true battle had only just begun. I had been working tirelessly for days, mapping out my strategy against David and Ticor. Despite my progress, I knew there was something missing, something beyond the scope of what I could handle with conventional tactics. And then the message came. It was from an unknown number. The message read simply, "We need to talk. Meet me at the West Side CPM. Bring only yourself." Curious and wary, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the next step in the game. Was it an ally or a trap? There was only one way to find out. At precisely 7 p.m., I entered the dimly lit cafe. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and fresh pastries, but the place was almost empty. A man sat alone in the far corner, his face partially hidden beneath the brim of a worn baseball cap. He was dressed in a simple black jacket, jeans, and a pair of leather gloves, and yet there was something about him that screamed experience, someone who had seen too much of the world. Alex Grant. The man's voice was low but clear. I nodded and approached, taking a seat across from him without saying a word. My name is Jack Wolf, the man said, extending a hand. I know you've been busy with your little war against David. It's not going well, is it? I didn't shake his hand. I studied Jack carefully, my instincts telling me that this wasn't a casual meeting. How do you know about my situation? I asked. Jack smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. I've been following your work for a while now. I have a vested interest in seeing you win this. But to do that, you need more than just corporate strategy and public legal battles. You need something else. I raised an eyebrow. And what exactly is that something else? Jack leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Connections, influence, resources, things that aren't on the books. You'll never beat David and Tekor with the rules of the game they're playing, but I can offer you a way to level the playing field. I have resources, people, who can help you, but of course, there's a price. I was quiet for a moment. I didn't trust Jack, but I couldn't afford to ignore him either. What kind of help are we talking about? Jack's smile remained, but there was a coldness behind it. Let's just say I can provide you with access to certain underground networks. People who can leak information, discredit your enemies, and cause just the right kind of chaos. You won't find these kinds of connections in your lawyer's office, Alex. A chill ran down my spine. What Jack was suggesting wasn't just shady, it was bordering on dangerous. This was no longer a fight to protect my company, this was a battle where the stakes involved much more than just business. And what do you want in return? I asked, my voice steady but skeptical. Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes gleaming. I want a small favor from you, once you've won. A business favor, a very lucrative one. In return for this favor, I'll ensure you have all the support you need to defeat David and Tekor. You won't just win, you'll decimate them. My mind was racing. I had no idea what Jack's favor might entail, but it was clear that whatever it wasn't something I could afford to ignore. Jack Wolf was a man who knew the darkest corners of the business world, and getting him on my side could mean the difference between victory and defeat. But at what cost? I don't need a favor from someone like you, I said, my tone cold. I'm not getting involved in anything illegal. Jack's eyes narrowed. Illegal? Let's not pretend. In this game, the line between right and wrong is a lot blurrier than you think. All I'm offering is the opportunity to fight fire with fire. You want to beat David? Then you'll have to make some hard choices, Alex. I stood up, still uncertain. I'll think about it. Jack followed suit, of course. But I'll warn you, time is running out. You'll have to make your decision soon. You don't want to be left behind, Alex. Not when the game's about to change. With that, Jack turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As I sat back down, my mind was in turmoil. I had always prided myself on playing things clean, on doing business the right way. But now, with everything on the line, I realized that I might have to bend just a little to survive. The question was, how far was I willing to go? The days after my meeting with Jack Wolf weighed heavily on my mind. The choice before me was clear. I could continue fighting David and Tekor the traditional way, through legal channels and careful maneuvering. Or I could take Jack's offer and step into the world of backdoor dealings and underground networks. I couldn't afford to waste any more time thinking about it. The threat to my company, to everything I had worked for, was too great. The decision was made. I began formulating my plan, one that involved actions in the shadows. I had never operated this way before, but with the stakes so high, I knew there was no other option. I would start by infiltrating the very networks that David had used to gain leverage. I would gather dirt, secrets, anything that could bring David down. However, as my plan unfolded, something unexpected started happening. The people I had once considered allies, the ones who had been with me during the early days of Grandtext, started slipping away. First, it was my closest business partner, Peter. A phone call, then a brief meeting, and suddenly, Peter was too busy to help with the upcoming presentations. My gut twisted as I sensed something was off. Next came the staff. One by one, some of my most trusted employees began to disappear, leaving the company with fewer hands to hold it up. Whispers of discontent spread through the halls of Grantech, fueled by rumors of a high-profile lawsuit and the ever-growing threat from Tekor. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was losing control. But it wasn't just about the business side. It was personal. The friends who had once celebrated my success now turned their backs, unwilling to stand by me as the storm approached. People I had trusted, people I thought would always be there for me, were gone. The loneliness I had ignored for so long now crept up on me, cold and suffocating. It was a betrayal I hadn't anticipated, and it hurt far more than any legal battle. Amid this growing isolation, I found solace in the plan I was now putting into motion. I began working in secret, contacting old contacts, people who had long since abandoned the corporate world for something far more elusive. Hackers, rogue journalists, private investigators, and disgraced former employees with grudges to settle. Each of them had a part to play in the web I was weaving, and slowly but surely the threads began to come together. The underground networks that Jack Wolf had hinted at were real. My first major move involved getting access to a highly classified tech conference where David was scheduled to speak. I had a mole planted within the event's security team, who provided me with valuable information: David's presentation slides, his future business plans, and most crucially, a set of confidential agreements that Tekor had made with foreign investors. The documents were explosive. They revealed illegal tax evasions, under-table payments, and dealings with questionable partners. This was the kind of information that could bring down an entire company. It wasn't enough just to expose David anymore. I now had the power to dismantle Tekor's entire operation, if I chose to use it. As I stared at the papers in front of me, a wave of realization washed over me. I was no longer just fighting for my company. I was building an empire of secrets, a fortress that could destroy David and anyone else who dared to cross me. But with every step deeper into this world, I felt more isolated. I was losing everything: the loyalty of my employees, my friends, and even my sense of self. The choices ahead weren't easy. I could continue down this dark path, knowing that victory would come with a heavy price. Or I could pull back, abandon the plan, and fight for my company the old-fashioned way. But deep down, I knew there was no turning back now. The line between right and wrong had blurred, and there was no way to undo what had already been set in motion. The underground network was in place, and I was ready for the next phase of the war. But as I closed my laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just fighting against David anymore. I was fighting against everything I had ever believed in. Everything I had built was crumbling. The endless legal battles, the loss of trusted allies, and the ever-tightening grip of David's conspiracy had driven me to the brink. My company was now a sinking ship, and every attempt to stay afloat seemed to only hasten its inevitable demise. For weeks, I had been gathering evidence, connecting the dots, and trying to outmaneuver David at every turn. But with each victory, David seemed to counter with something stronger: insider leak, a smear campaign, or even a carefully timed public accusation. I felt like I was stuck in a never-ending game of cat and mouse, where every time I thought I had David cornered, my friend turned to know me slipped through my fingers. But then, in a quiet, unassuming moment, everything changed. I had been going through old files in my office, trying to piece together the last threads of a legal strategy that could save Grantech. As I flipped through a stack of papers, one document caught my attention, a contract buried deep within the layers of corporate filings. At first, it seemed irrelevant, just another routine business agreement. But as I read through it, my heart stopped. It was a deal between David and a multinational conglomerate, a tech giant that had been quietly absorbing smaller companies in their sector. The agreement, signed just months before David's lawsuit against me, outlined the transfer of control over Grantech's intellectual property and key assets to the conglomerate. The terms were clear. Once the company fell, David would receive a substantial payout, and the conglomerate would take over the lion's share of the company's patents and technologies. David had orchestrated the entire situation. This wasn't just about business rivalry or a petty grudge. It was a calculated move to dismantle Grantech and sell it off piece by piece. My blood ran cold as I realized the full extent of David's betrayal. The company I had worked so hard to build wasn't just under threat from a lawsuit, it was being handed over to a corporate giant, all with David's blessing. If I couldn't stop this deal, I would lose everything: my company, my legacy, and my future. Determined not to let David win, I set a plan into motion. I knew I couldn't take down David through legal means alone. The truth was, the court of law had been bought and paid for, and David had too many resources at his disposal. I needed to hit David where it hurt most: his pride and his bank account. That night, I met with Jack Wolf, the man who had become my unlikely ally in this dark journey. Jack had the resources, the connections, and the reputation to make things happen in the shadows. I laid out my plan. We would leak the details of the contract between David and the conglomerate to the public. The news would hit the press at just the right moment, when the media would be most eager to expose a corporate betrayal. The backlash from the public and investors would destroy David's credibility, causing the deal to collapse. But the twist came when I realized that Jack had his own agenda. Jack, having known the inner workings of both the business world and the underworld, had been carefully positioning himself for this moment. He wasn't just helping me out of the goodness of his heart, he had plans for his own share of the spoils. Despite this, I pressed forward. With Jack's connections, we released the information to the press, ensuring it would make waves. As expected, the media storm was immediate. Within hours, the story was everywhere: David's secret deal with the conglomerate, his backdoor dealings, and the extent of his betrayal were all laid bare for the world to see. Investors pulled out, stock prices plummeted, and the conglomerate backed away from the deal. David was now a pariah in the business world, his credibility shattered beyond repair. But as I watched the fallout unfold, I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't as simple as they seemed. The plan had worked, but the consequences were far from over. Jack's smirk when the deal had gone public lingered in my mind. There was something deeper at play here, and I wasn't sure if I had just played into Jack's hands. In the aftermath, as I stood over the ruins of what had once been my thriving company, I realized that this victory, this final blow against David, had come at a far greater cost than I had anticipated. I had won, but in doing so, I had entered a world where no one was truly trustworthy, and every victory only led to more complicated battles ahead. After the explosive fallout from the public revelation of David's betrayal, I thought I had finally reached the end of my personal hell. I had exposed the deal between David and the conglomerate, effectively destroying his credibility and stopping the hostile takeover of Grantech. The media storm was still raging, and investors were slowly returning to the company, but I felt hollow inside. The victory had cost me more than I cared to admit. I had lost my closest allies, my friends, and the trust of the people I once relied on. But nothing could have prepared me for the revelation that came next, the truth about Emily. It started with a strange feeling gnawing at the back of my mind. Despite my recent successes in dealing with David, something didn't feel right. I had always trusted Emily, my girlfriend of 2 years, the woman I thought I would spend my life with. She had been by my side during the hardest times, supporting me when everything seemed to be falling apart. But over the past few weeks, I noticed subtle shifts in her behavior, small things. Things I had brushed off as stress or the pressure of the situation. Emily had become more distant. She was always busy with her own work, leaving me to handle most of the aftermath of the media storm alone. When we did talk, it was always surface level, and she seemed distracted, as if she was somewhere else, thinking about something I couldn't grasp. I, caught up in the whirlwind of Grantech's survival, had let it slide. I had more pressing matters to deal with until now. One evening, after a long day at the office, I came home earlier than usual, determined to confront the unsettling feeling I had been ignoring. I was met with an empty apartment, the silence filling the space between me and the looming uncertainty. My mind raced as I sat down at my desk and stared at the pile of documents in front of me. My thoughts drifted back to the past week's Emily's increasing distance. Her coldness when David's name came up, her reluctance to engage in conversations about the lawsuit. That's when I found it. While going through some old emails on my laptop, I stumbled across a chain of messages that took my breath away. They were from Emily, and they weren't just casual messages. They were communications between her and David. The last message I read made my stomach drop. David, the plan is set. Alex is too focused on the legal side of things to notice the bigger picture. I'll keep him occupied, but you need to make sure the board stays aligned with you. Once the takeover is complete, we'll both be in the clear. Let's finish this. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred as the weight of the truth hit me like a freight train. Emily, the woman I loved, the one person I thought I could trust, had been conspiring with David from the very beginning. All along, she had been feeding me false reassurances, pretending to stand by my side while secretly working with my worst enemy to bring me down. The betrayal was gut-wrenching, not just because of the business aspect, but because of the personal connection. Emily hadn't just been a passive participant, she had been an active player in the destruction of everything I had worked for. My hands trembled as I read through the rest of the emails, each one more damning than the last. Emily had been the one to first suggest leveraging David's animosity toward me, suggesting that he create the perfect storm by pushing the lawsuit forward. She had promised David that I would fall right into their trap, that my idealism and moral compass would blind me to their plot. Tears welled up in my eyes, not because of anger, but because of the crushing sense of betrayal. How could Emily, someone I trusted with my heart, have done this? For what? Money, power, revenge? I couldn't sit still anymore. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and called Emily. She answered on the first ring, her voice calm, almost too calm. "Alex, I wasn't expecting you to call tonight." "How was the meeting?" she asked, her tone detached, almost rehearsed. "You were never expecting me to call, were you?" My voice cracked as I spoke. "Emily, what the hell is going on? Why didn't you tell me?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Emily's voice finally broke the stillness. Alex, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to get this far, but David offered me everything I ever wanted. I was just trying to survive. You don't understand. Understand what that you've been working with David to destroy me, to destroy everything I've built. My words were sharp, full of disbelief. How could you do this to me, Emily? How could you betray me like this? I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. I never wanted it to go this far, but I knew David could give me the life I wanted. I thought I could control it, but now I can't. My chest tightened, a lump forming in my throat. I couldn't hold back the flood of emotions, any more anger, sadness, betrayal. I had given her everything, and she had turned it into a lie. I trusted you, I said quietly, my voice breaking. There was no more to say. I hung up the phone, my body frozen in disbelief. As I sat in the dark, the weight of everything I had lost, my company, my love, my trust pressed down on me. Emily wasn't just an accomplice in David's scheme. She was the final piece in a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. The truth was out now, but the cost of it was devastating. The time had come. I stood in the dimly lit conference room of Grantech's headquarters. My eyes locked on the people who had shattered my life, Emily and David. It felt almost surreal. My heart pounded in my chest as I faced the two people who, until recently, had been at the center of my world. Now, they were the very reason I stood on the edge of losing everything. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. Emily stood across from me, her expression unreadable. The woman I had once trusted with everything now seemed like a stranger. Beside her, David stood confidently, a smirk on his face, as if he had already won. They had orchestrated this entire scheme. The lawsuit, the betrayal, the corporate sabotage, everything had been part of their plan. I didn't speak at first. I simply took in the sight of them, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. My mind raced, calculating my next move. But my emotions were clouded. Anger, pain, betrayal. It was a cocktail of feelings that threatened to overwhelm me. But I knew I couldn't let them win. David broke the silence with a mocking laugh. You know, Alex, I always thought you were too naive to see what was going on right under your nose. But then again, you were always too focused on playing the good guy. You never understood that in this world, loyalty is a transaction. You give, and you get something in return. My fists clenched, but I kept my composure. This wasn't about loyalty, David. This was about greed. About destroying everything I've built for your own selfish gain. David's eyes gleamed. You're right, but it was more than that. It's not just business, Alex. This was personal. You were always the golden boy, the one everyone praised. And I was just the one in the shadows, waiting for my chance to finally take what should have been mine. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always known there was animosity between us, but I never imagined it would escalate to this level. But before I could respond, Emily spoke, her voice soft but firm. Alex, I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her eyes welling with tears. But David, he promised me a future I couldn't have with you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was helping. I never meant for it to go this far. My heart twisted at her words. I wanted to believe her, to think that somewhere deep inside, she was still the person I had loved. But I couldn't ignore the facts. The truth was right in front of me, and no amount of regret would undo the damage. Help me, my voice cracked. You betrayed me, Emily. You and David both. This wasn't just about business. For you it was about revenge, about tearing me apart from the inside. Emily's face crumpled as the weight of my words hit her. She took a step forward, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Don't come near me." David chuckled again. "This is pathetic, Alex. All the money, all the power, and in the end, you're still just a man betrayed by the people closest to him. You can't win this fight. The company's already in shambles. You're done." But I wasn't listening to David anymore. I was focused, my mind clear for the first time in weeks. I knew what I had to do. My company, my legacy, wasn't just about the money or the stock market anymore. It was about standing up for myself, taking control of my own destiny. "David, you're wrong," I said, my voice steady. "You thought you had it all figured out, but you underestimated me. You underestimated everything I've worked for. I've been too busy fighting you with the rules, but now I'm done playing your game. It's my turn to fight back, and this time there will be no mercy." I turned to Emily, my eyes softening. "As for you, you chose him over me, and that's something I'll never forgive. But I don't need your help. I'll take back what's mine without you." With that, I turned and walked toward the door, my heart heavy but my resolve stronger than ever. I didn't need to explain myself to them anymore. The final confrontation had ended, and now it was time to reclaim my company, my dignity, and my future. As the door closed behind me, I knew the war was far from over. There were still battles to fight, but now I was in control. And this time, David and Emily wouldn't be the ones calling the shots. I stood at the precipice of everything I had worked for, my future hanging by a thread. The tension had reached a boiling point. The lawsuit against Grantech was escalating rapidly, and the media coverage was turning into a storm that seemed impossible to weather. On one hand, I had David, who had been determined to destroy me from the inside out, and on the other, a conglomerate eager to buy out Grantech and take control of my company. If I couldn't turn the tide, everything I had spent years building, my dreams, my reputation, my legacy would be gone. The conference room was silent as I stared at the stack of documents in front of me. The weight of the situation was suffocating. The decision before me was more than just business, it was personal. The choices I made in the coming hours would not only affect my company, but my entire future. My reputation, my relationships, everything hung in the balance. In the past, I had always believed that hard work, integrity, and loyalty were enough to win in the business world. I had prided myself on doing things the right way, but now, as the walls closed in around me, I realized that sometimes the right way wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to play dirty to win. I thought about the deal with the conglomerate, the one that would buy out Grantech and turn me into just another employee in a larger, faceless corporation. The money, the security, the success. It would be the easy way out. But it would also mean losing everything I had built, and worse. It would mean accepting that I had been defeated by David and the very forces I had spent my entire career fighting against. Then there was the other option, the harder, more dangerous route, the one that would require me to fight back with everything I had left. It was a path that involved risk, betrayal, and a willingness to burn bridges. It meant confronting not just David, but the corporate world that had turned its back on me. It meant standing tall, no matter the cost. But this was my last chance, my final shot at redemption. I couldn't let David win. I couldn't let Emily's betrayal define me. I had come too far, fought too hard, and sacrificed too much to let it all slip away now. I had to make a stand, not just for Grantech, but for myself. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. It was Jack Wolf, the man who had helped me navigate the darker side of this fight. Jack had promised me everything: Isorsis connections, and the power to strike at David. I had already made my decision, but I needed Jack's help one last time. "Jack," I said, my voice steady, "I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Let's end this." There was a pause on the other end before Jack's voice came through, smooth and calculated. "Are you sure, Alex? Once you make this choice, there's no turning back. You'll burn bridges with everyone, your investors, your employees, maybe even your friends. But if you want to win, we'll do it. You just have to be willing to accept the cost." I inhaled deeply, the weight of the decision settling in. I know the cost, but I've already lost too much. I'm not letting David take this from me. Let's do it. The line went quiet for a moment, and then Jack spoke again, his tone colder. "Understood. You'll have what you need. Prepare yourself, Alex. This isn't going to be pretty." As I hung up the phone, a sense of clarity washed over me. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready. Ready to take the fight to David, to face the consequences of my choices, and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The next few hours would decide everything. My company, my reputation, my future. I knew that, in the end, it wasn't just about business, it was about survival. I had made my choice, and now there was no going back. The war was over, or so I thought. After weeks of confrontation, strategic moves, and deceit, I had managed to outsmart David and dismantle his plans. The lawsuit had been dropped, Tekor's attempt to take over Grantech was thwarted, and the company was slowly recovering from the storm. The press had turned in my favor, the public had moved on, and investors were slowly trickling back, reassured by the fact that Grantech had weathered the storm. The business was stable again, at least on the surface. But even as I stood in my office, looking out over the New York skyline, a gnawing feeling lingered in the back of my mind. The battle had cost me far more than I had imagined. The loss of trust, the betrayals from those closest to me, and the emotional toll of fighting against not only David, but also the harsh corporate world had left deep scars. It was clear that this wasn't just a fight for my company, it was a fight for my soul. As I stared out the window, I realized that I had won, but at a personal cost I hadn't anticipated. David was gone, his reputation in tatters, but my victory was bittersweet. I had trusted the wrong people. I had made mistakes, had let my ambition cloud my judgment. Emily, the woman I had loved, had been part of the conspiracy all along. And the price for this victory was not just the betrayal of my closest allies, was the erosion of my own self. But despite everything, I had survived. I had come out on the other side stronger, but not unscathed. In the silence that followed the storm, I came to an important realization. Life was not just about winning. It wasn't about the accolades, the success, or the number of battles you could win. It was about learning to face betrayal, to accept the scars, and still keep moving forward. It was about standing firm, even when the foundation of everything you had built crumbled beneath you. The phone on my desk buzzed, breaking my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Jack Wolf's name flashed across the display. Jack had been an unexpected ally, a man whose loyalty I couldn't fully trust, yet whose resources had made all the difference in the fight. "Alex," Jack's voice came through the line, calm as ever. "I'm hearing whispers about a new opportunity for you. Something big, could be profitable, but it's also risky. I'll send you the details." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city below. I could feel the temptation: another fight, another opportunity for wealth and power. But something inside me shifted. This time, I wasn't interested. I didn't need to chase after success or victory at any cost. I had already fought and won the biggest battle of all, the battle for my own integrity. "No, Jack," I replied firmly. "I'm done chasing. Whatever comes next, it'll come on my terms." There was silence on the other end of the line, followed by a low chuckle from Jack. "Well, Alex, I guess you've learned something after all." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As the call ended, I felt the weight of the past few months begin to lift. I had nothing left to prove to anyone, not to David, not to Emily, and not to myself. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. The journey had been difficult, but I had learned that life wasn't just about victories. It was about how you handled the losses and how you stood up after the world knocked you down. And I had stood tall. The story didn't end with grand triumphs or perfect resolutions. Not all the characters had happy endings. Some were left with the consequences of their actions, and others would never get a second chance. The world kept spinning, life went on, and I knew that no matter what came next, I was ready. In the end, the most important thing was that I had learned how to keep moving forward, to embrace the lessons from my past, and to accept the price of my choices. I had faced betrayal, made mistakes, and suffered losses, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live life on my own terms. And with that, my journey came to a close, not with a final victory, but with the understanding that sometimes the greatest strength lies in simply standing firm in the face of the storm.